minutes be adopted as written. All those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The minutes have been accepted. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign, swearing in of new senators,
None.
communications by the president. Just briefly wanted to make sure all senators are aware that the annual parliamentary luncheon is scheduled for 1 p.m. next Wednesday at the Hilton downtown. Messages from the Governor General.
None.
Messages from the House of Assembly.
Messages from the House of Assembly.
Bahamas number 20. Message to the Honorable the President and Honorable Members of the Senate from the Speaker and representatives of the Honorable House of Assembly. The House of Assembly acquaints the Honorable the Senate that they have passed the following bills and desire the consent of that Honorable Chamber, namely, a bill for an act to provide for substantial economic presence and annual reporting of a commercial entity carrying on relevant activities in the Bahamas and for connected purposes. A bill for an act to remove exemptions for a certain category of companies or entities incorporated in the Bahamas. A bill for an act to provide for a register of beneficial ownership. A bill for an act to amend the Penal Code Act to provide for the offense of intent to defraud the government. A bill for an act to provide for the regulation of non-profit organizations and for connected purposes. House of Assembly, Nassau, 6 December 2018, House and Mutri Speaker.
Laying of documents by ministers. Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Carl Bethel.
Thank you, Madam President. May it please you, I beg leave to lay on the table of this House the road traffic, taxi cab, Grand Bahama Zone fares regulations of 2018.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Further laying of documents.
No further documents to lay.
Communications by ministers.
None.
Communications by senators.
None.
Questions.
None.
Answers to questions.
None.
Presentations of petitions.
None.
Appointment of select committees.
None.
Reports of committees.
None.
First reading of bills.
Madam President, I beg leave to move for the first reading of a bill for an act to provide for substantial economic presence and annual reporting of a commercial entity carrying on relevant activities in the Bahamas and for connected purposes, if I may obtain a seconder.
A second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to provide for substantial economic presence and annual reporting of a commercial entity carrying on relevant activities in the Bahamas and for connected purposes be read a first time.
As many.
Oh, I'm sorry. As many as are in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The bill will be read a first time.
A bill for an act to provide for substantial economic presence and annual reporting.
Okay. Sorry for confusing you.
Otherwise, it's going to 3 hours. 3 minutes.
Further first readings.
Thank you, Madam President. I beg leave to move for the first reading of a bill for an act to remove exemptions from a certain category of companies or entities incorporated in the Bahamas.
Is there a second?
A second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to remove exemptions for a certain category of companies or entities incorporated in the Bahamas be read a first time. As many as are in favor should say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to remove exemption for the certain category of companies or entities incorporated in the trust.
Further first readings?
Madam President, I beg leave to move for the first reading of a bill for an act to provide for a register of beneficial ownership.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded.
Oops.
AG is going to move a little quicker.
Yes, ma'am.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to provide for a register of beneficial ownership be read a first time. As many as are in favor should say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to provide for a register of beneficial ownership.
Further first readings?
Madam President, I beg leave to move for the first reading of a bill for an act to amend the penal code to provide for the offense of intent to defraud the government.
Rice the second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to amend the Penal Code Act to provide for the offense of intent to defraud the be read a first time. As many as are in favor should say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to amend the Penal Code Act to provide for the offense of intent to defraud the government.
Further first readings?
Madam President, I beg leave to move, I was even slower this time. I beg leave to move for the first reading of a bill for an act to provide for the regulation of non-profit organizations and for connected purposes. If I may obtain a seconder.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to provide for the regulation of non-profit organizations and for connected purposes be read a first time. As many as are in favor should say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to provide for the regulation of non-profit organizations and for connected purposes.
Further first readings?
No further first readings. Let me just say, Madam President, that those 5 bills that we just read are bills that are necessary for the Bahamas to comply with the obligations that we committed to, which the whole world is being made to comply with in terms of the base erosion and profit shifting initiative of the European Union, which initiative is also directly supported by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development and also by the G20 countries at their last plenary meeting held in Buenos Aires, Argentina last week, where their communique specifically supported the initiative. And these are bills that are necessary for the Bahamas to be fully compliant and to avoid any threat of countervailing measures or blacklisting. That's where we are today. Thank you. More on that will be, more information on that will be shared as we commence the debate and hopefully finish it on Monday coming, the 10th of December.
Second reading and committal.
The VAT, BEC, BPL, VAT, VAT amendment. Yes, thank you.
Understand.
Yes, thank you. It's a one-page wonder.
Understand.
Yes, Madam President, I beg leave now to move for the second reading and committal of the Value-Added Tax Amendment Number 2 Bill of 2018. Madam President, this is I think this must be a world record short bill. It is precisely 2 sides of 1 page long. And the objects and reasons, I think, are very clear. The bill is deemed to come in force on the first day of November 2018, meaning that it is a retroactive bill, and I'll explain what that means in a minute, and expires on the 1st of July 2019. It seeks to amend the second schedule of the Value-Added Tax Act. Thank you. By increasing the qualifying threshold for the value-added tax exemption on a supply of electricity services by any utility service provider from $200 or below per billing cycle to $300 or below per billing cycle. Madam President, the initial bill was passed in the last budget period, and the intention was to provide VAT relief for the most needful consumers of electricity, meaning the poor, and to provide that, in essence, their bills would not be charged VAT when it came time to pay. As members would all be aware, recently, due to the rise in global prices for oil, that has had some consequential impact on the rate for which electricity is charged in the Bahamas. There have been widespread complaints that the price has suddenly gone up. You know, I spent all my life, and I know all of us here, spent all our lives arguing about Mr. Surcharge. In fact, Mr. Surcharge, meaning the extra costs that BEC historically would add to the bill, the electricity bill, during the payment period, monthly, it became a cartoon figure. It was a light bulb that Eddie Minnis, first of all, started when he used to do cartoons in the daily papers, talking about Mr. Surcharge. And we are faced today with a similar situation where the automatic surcharging provisions that have governed BEC came into play. It is distressing that, you know, having spent the few years that I spent on this earth, that Bahamians continue to be plagued with this whole problem of the vagaries in the international price of oil and the need to impose these surcharges to capture the costs of electricity when they rise. It's always nicer when the price of oil is falling or remains at a low level. It is unfortunate, though, that errors, this was that errors in the global economy, disharmonies, problems in the Gulf region, all contribute towards instability in the oil prices, and every so often we are faced with these spikes. So this bill raises the threshold from $200, which, having regard to the price of oil last July, would have been enough to protect the most economically needful consumers from having to pay VAT on their electricity. It became less effective, and the government very rapidly, and to the credit of the Right Honorable, the Most Honorable, the Prime Minister, Dr. the Most Honorable Hubert Alexander Minnis, moved rapidly to bring this amendment. The amendment is retroactive, so effectively it applies to all electricity bills from the 1st of November of this year, and will go straight through until the end of June, the first day of July of next year. Having regard to where the world has gone since the days when I was a little boy, it is clear that as a people, we have failed to take advantage of the advances in technology and the availability of alternative energy sources whether as a nation or in terms of individual consumers. I think that going forward, we have to have a more engaged response and embrace of the emerging renewable sources of energy and move away to the extent that we can from carbon-based, non-renewable, market force-driven sources of energy. Let us, if we look at the realities, that we have 365 days of the year, and more than 300 days in the Bahamas are sunny days. And even with a little bit of cloud, that doesn't stop the radiation from the sun reaching solar panels. We are really frittering away something that is really a gift from God to us, because the technologies now are such that we are able to harness this God-given gift, and to do so really in a targeted way. And so going forward, I am sure that we as a people need to design tax exemptions and tax structures and support mechanisms in such a way that we can make the use of solar or wind or alternative renewable energy resources more easily available to ordinary Bahamians. Even if our main electrical supplier, being BPL, but not the exclusive one, of course, we have Grand Bahama, which has its own power company, Grand Bahama Power and Light. Even if these behemoths seem wedded to outdated and dying sources of fuel, the non-renewables, if we as a people could be given greater opportunities to ourselves take the initiative. And sometimes, we speak about governing for the people, by the people, of the people, but sometimes the people need to be given the chance to take the lead on government agencies. And so I would hope that going forward, we would look very carefully at ways to provide real incentives and opportunities for ordinary Bahamians to access, and a part of this also is something that the business sector could look at, for them to access. So the banks should design lending packages that would enable persons of limited means to access renewable sources of electrical generation for their own uses. You see, it's not only a question of the government, and I know members opposite will stand around and say, government, and point fingers. I say it's broader than government. It's something that we as a nation need to address. Not simply government, but lending institutions, social institutions, friendly societies, credit unions, banks, business houses, for example, suppliers. The old merchant class, in the days when access to formal banking services were greatly constricted for the majority of people, devised ways. They themselves became lenders in terms of furniture, household necessities, utensils, supplies, basic supplies. The merchant class themselves became, in a sense, persons who developed the whole system of what they call hire purchase. You paid down, you got the use of it, and you paid over a period of years to settle the cost. So it is not simply a question of what the government does. It's also a question of what the drivers of the economy are prepared to do. And so from this humble position here, I call on all of those movers and shakers in our economy to rethink where we're going, to rethink how we can all assist each other in exploring, utilizing, and benefiting from that gift that the good Lord has given these blessed isles, these Isles of June, this land of eternal summer. At least 300 days of good sunshine, and that free of charge. They say, you know, some people have big nose because they are free. But I think we should have big solar, because sun free. Let's do it, Bahamas. Let us all rethink where we are, rethink how we do business. Because I can tell you, see, it's not so simple a question of saying, well, let the business houses go solar, because that would leave the cost of electricity on us unbearable. I'm not speaking about business houses being able to do this, self-generate. I'm speaking about ordinary Bahamians. I'm speaking about houses over the hill. That's what I'm speaking about. I'm speaking about the lower and upper middle classes. I'm speaking about ordinary Bahamians being empowered through a national endeavor to embrace alternative energies that once you paid the capital cost of putting in the infrastructure is free. And then I think the Bahamas could move in a direction where we would start to see not only reductions in the cost of living, but reductions in the cost of doing business as well. Because unless we solve this energy problem, you know, the biggest single complaint, apart from the cost of beer in the hotels, is the cost of electricity. Cost of electricity. And so, as a nation, I think we need to bring more focus, and I hope that all stakeholders will join us in this endeavor to make the Bahamas an even better place. And let's always remember, the sun is our gift from God. Let us put it to full use. Thank you, Madam President.
Is there a second? Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Jamal Moss.
I want to different right now. What? Oh, good. You didn't teach my coffee? Oh, very good. Naughty boy. All gone. And we're not stressed. How long did Chinese talk? This was it. Chinese sitting there and yapping. I was
Madam President, once again, it's truly an honor to second a bill, and it's also an honor and pleasure to stand here to make my contribution to this debate on this value-added tax amendment bill. As always, I want to thank my God above, the ever-creator, most merciful and loving God, for allowing me to be here and to speak to the service of my people. Also, I wish to once again publicly thank my leader and Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Dr. the Honorable Hubert Minnis, for entrusting me with this high honor to speak on behalf of the people, especially the youth of our nation. Madam President, We live in a world where powerful countries control certain markets. We live in a world where powerful countries control the prices, and in this case, the cost of oil. According to the CNBC.com published report, Monday, the 30th of July, 2018, U.S. crude rises at 2.1%, settling at $70.13, boosted by signs of tightly oil supply. Last month, November 30th, 2018 to be exact, global oil prices have dropped from $79 per barrel to $55 per barrel. In October, BPL purchased up to 241,743 barrels of diesel oil for New Providence and 79,199 barrels for the Family Islands. BPL purchased months of supply because of the known and proven unstableness of the oil market's prices. However, BPL officials have said that the decreases won't be realized on customers' bills for several months. Members opposite who are senior to me have told their supporters and even the country that the FNM is carrying the light bill and trying to kill the Bahamian people. This is nothing more than a lie from the pits of hell. As a matter of fact, the former executive chairman of the BPL and PLP MP, Mr. Leslie Miller, said in the Tribune back in 2016, and I quote, "The biggest cost at the corporation is the cost of fuel." End quote. This is what the PLP MP said. Kind of contrary to what they're saying. Also, I want to say publicly that I agree 100% with the minister responsible for BPL, the Honorable Desmond Bannister, when he said in the lower house that anyone who seeks to be irresponsible in seeking to confuse the Bahamian people or cast blame on the increases on the FNM government knows better. Madam President, this is a proud moment for our country and for the people of the Bahamas. And the reason why I say that is because this FNM government is once again demonstrating that it still has the connection with the average Bahamian in being understanding and at the same time bringing relief during these unpredictable and uncontrollable times. That's right. Relief. That is a word that best describes this bill. I say that because in 2015, under the PLP's watch as the government, they introduced VAT on the Bahamian people and explained that the money will be used to pay off the national debt. Well, you see, that didn't go that way. But what really befalls me is that the same people who are talking didn't do diddly squat to bring relief for the Bahamian people when slapping VAT on electricity. And not just on electricity, water, education, health, medicine, insurance, and to cut a long story short, they put it on everything. With that being done, they didn't care about the relief on the poor man. They didn't care about the relief on the single mother. And they didn't care about relief for the struggling families out there. They simply just didn't care about offering relief to the Bahamian people. Madam President, the Bible teaches us in Matthew chapter 25, and I quote, "Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for the one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it for me." Let me repeat that again because, you know what I mean, I see they tuning me out one in the phone and the next one just let you know whatever. But let me just say it again in Matthew chapter 25, and I quote, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of these least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." This African government is doing just that. The Bible speaks about relief. In 2015, 2016, and even to the 2017 budget, which was prepared by them, there was no exemptions on water and sewage, education, medical, insurance, or even BPL. No relief. None whatsoever. But this African government in 2018 budget delivered on their promises by removing VAT from water and sewage, education, medical, BPL, and the list goes on. Therefore, them introduced VAT exemptions on bills on or less than $200, and a few months later, which we are debating now, due to the uncontrollable and unstable markets, the VAT exemption on electricity increased to $300. This is what you call a caring government, unlike the former administration, who didn't do anything to bring relief. But this Effingham government is demonstrating that despite the challenges and uncertainty in the world markets, this administration will do all in its power to bring relief to the Bahamian people. Madam President, the former administration talks about how this government has up to 5,000 Bahamians living in the dark because of the high electricity bills. And what is now being done is nothing more than a political gimmick, show, and the list goes on. Well, if I recall, back in 2016, after they slapped the VAT on the average Bahamian people, with no types of relief in place or in sight, the same bunch had over 12,000 Bahamians living in darkness, all because you intentionally failed to give the Bahamian people the much needed relief they needed to keep their lights on.
Point, Madam President.
What's the point of order?
Point of order.
Chair recognizes Senator the
Thank
Honorable
you so much, Madam President.
Michael Darville.
I didn't want to stop.
Senator, can you take your seat, please?
Yeah, I didn't want to stop the senator in full flight.
Your point of order, though,
Yes,
Senator.
the point of order is that he's making statements that are completely misleading the Bahamian people. He indicated that the present administration removed VAT on all medical bills. That is incorrect. As a private practicing physician, we charge VAT for every client we see, so that is in place. The second thing that he said was that the current administration is under the former administration, 12,000 Bahamians were in darkness as compared to the 5,000 individuals or residents in darkness at this time. That figure is bogus, it don't exist, and until he could find evidence of the 12,000 people left in darkness by the Progressive Liberal Party, he should bring it to this place.
Thank you. Senator Jamal. Senator Jamal Moss, I know that you will correct some of the statements that you made,
Yes, ma'am.
and let's please do that and withdraw what you said
Madam
previously.
President, first of all, I do apologize when I said medical. I was really, I should have said medicine and insurance, so premiums. So my apologies on that one, and thank you so much, Senator Darville. Also, I understand Senator Darville said that the 12,000 figure is incorrect. Well, Madam President, one thing with me as a senator who represents the government, I come with facts. I don't bring you facts. Yeah, and I got the facts with you, Madam President. According to the Tribune's editorial, Thursday, December 22nd, 2016, 12,000 disconnected for not paying their electricity bills. I also will go into my speech and you'll see the connection going forward. As I said, in the Tribune article, December 2016, the lights was off. 12,000 Bahamians with lights were off. They also quoted the former Deputy Prime Minister and Minister responsible for BPL, who was also your leader, by saying that, and I quote, that the government was working with Bahamas Power and Light to write off many of the company's delinquent accounts, end quote. The article then continued by saying that the CEO, who you all brought in, now senators, the PLP, the PLP, former government, who they hired, spoke out against them, and she reiterated that the BPL officials were not in any talks with the government over forgiveness or write-off program. Wow. But again, the article simply says 12,000. And also, Mr. Winters, who was also working at BPL, said, and I quote, that the 10% translates to up to 12,000 Bahamians. The survey was conducted between October 24th and 30th of this year, well, 2016. So I come with facts. I mean, I know I might be young, but I mean, don't take advantage. Madam President, if I can continue. I think
Madam
I've proven
President,
myself.
point of
Madam
order.
President. I can continue.
The senator,
Hold on.
senator made reference. Yes, the senator made reference to an editorial in the Tribune in 2016, and that editorial in the Tribune was not reflective to really what was happening at BPL at the time. I was in the former administration at the time, and yes, there were individuals who had delinquent accounts, and the government moved swiftly to try to make right and try to bring some of these individuals back on the grid. It was a policy that we left in place.
What is your point of order, though, Senator?
The point of order is that he made a statement that 12,000 people were left without electricity by the former administration when we admitted government. That is incorrect.
Okay. And
That is incorrect.
senators, please. I believe that the senator indicated that those 12,000 persons who did not have electricity, he read from an article that was in the Tribune. And we will accept that and move on.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Like I said, I know I'm young, but young guys try to take advantage of my opposition. I'm ever grateful to the Madam President for protecting me. Thank you for protecting me. As I said, going forward, I gotta say, I gotta. The article then can, I agree. That's what I want. Since Ephraim's ascension to office, we brought relief to the people. Last my check, I am on the floor. Like
Senator, please direct your comments
Yes, ma'am.
to the chair.
Yes, ma'am.
The chair is here to determine both protection of the government senators as well as the opposition. Leave it to me.
No, but I'm
Leave
saying-
it to me at the chair.
No, I see.
Please talk to the chair.
Yes, sir. And Madam President, once again, I want to say thank you so much for defending me as a young senator in this place. Since Ephraim's ascension to office, we brought relief to the BME people and ensured that medicine that the doctor prescribed was not just for a few, but for all who was willing to keep their lights on and pay back what they owe to the BME people in incremental stages. Because of that much-needed people's time relief, we saw a dramatic drop in the amount of homes living in darkness. I say to the BME people, when it comes to the PLP, talk as they are, do as they not.
Right now.
Madam President, while they make fun of this relief bill, I would like to call, as I would like to call it, keep in mind that over 64,000 Bahamians will continue to benefit from this. When I look at the data, I see since July 2018 that there seems to be an upward projection where Bahamians are taking advantage of this relief and keeping their bills below $200. I come again with facts. Yes, Madam President, again. If you look at, for example, Abaco, bills ranging at $200, it's about $3,287. That number has steadily grew. In August, we saw an increase with $3,371. And in September, 3,663 homes. And in October was 3,727. We also could go to Auckland, we could go to Bimini, we could go to Cat Island, Central Andros, Crooked Island, big up to Crooked Island, Eleuthera, Exuma, Great Harbor Key, Inagua, Long Island, Ragged Island, Rum Key, San Salvador, the list goes on. And you're telling me that this relief that this administration is bringing is not going to help Bahamians? Madam President, this is a proud day in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And that's just a 200. So now that this government is raising the exemption to 300, which automatically means that more Bahamians who normally see their light bills at 300 will begin to experience relief this government is going to bestow on them. So while you throw some shades here and there, or even make a mockery of this bill, Bahamians living in Abaco, Andros, Auckland, Bimini, Cat Island, Eleuthera, Crooked Island, Exuma, Great Harbor Key, Inagua, Mayaguana, San Salvador, Nassau, and the list goes on, will continue to benefit from this VAT exemption relief. I would like to publicly congratulate this administration, this FM administration, for keeping their word to bring relief for the common man, the average Bahamian in these uncontrollable and unpredictable times. This government, while fixing the colossal economic mess the former administration left behind, is working every day to improve our image, not just on the national level, but on the international level. At the same time, the government is bringing relief to the Bahamian people in incremental stages. The reality is nothing will happen overnight, but based on this government's determination and steadfast actions, things will get better by 2022. Again, cleaning after the PLP is no joke, but we will do a better job compared to how we met it. Madam President, as I get ready to close, and I know those opposite are finally saying thank you, Lord, I support this VAT exemption amendment to BPL because it brings relief to all Bahamians, and this is what a caring government do. May God continue to guide this government. May God continue to bless the Bahamian people, and may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Madam President, I am on the second bill.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to amend the Value-Added Tax Act be read a second time and committed. As many? Chair Recommendable Jo Beth Colby Davis.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, thank you, Senator Hanfield, who's been very kind to me since my return on maternity leave. We've developed a friendship now.
With an independent senator.
With the independent one, yeah. Madam President, as always, I'm grateful to God for the opportunity to present in this place on behalf of the Bahamian people. And I stand today to bring contributions to the VAT Act 2018, which is the VAT exemption on electricity bills up to $300. Madam President, let me state that the purpose of us being here today, whether we are the government or the opposition, our purpose should be to do what we can within our powers to make life better for Bahamians from every walk of life. So it is no surprise, Madam President, that I fully support this relief to all that will benefit once this is passed. Despite the fact that this amendment on face value is a political ploy to veil ineptness, nevertheless, I fully support the relief in the form of a VAT exemption because some Bahamians will benefit, however short term. Additionally, Madam President, this is exactly the type of unplanned, out of touch, and incompetence the opposition speaks of when we debate in this place and the other place. This F&M government promised better. They told the people it is their time. And no matter how many times we, the opposition, warns of the holes in their policies when they bring them, this F&M government continues to charge ahead only to return to this place and the other place, wasting the people's time to clean up errors that could have been avoided. Madam President, does this F&M government honestly think that the temporary relief granted with this VAT exemption will comprehensively address the challenges faced in the country in the energy sector? Or do they agree with their member who suggested taking cowboys as the new way of life? What happened to the promised energy reform? What happened to the promised reduction in energy costs for all? By the way, Madam President, all over the globe, we see a decrease in the cost of oil and lower price of gas at the petrol station in places such as the United States. However, no relief has yet to reach to the Bahamian people except this sort of slam bam policy. Like my leader said, this F&M government is placing a Band-Aid on a bleeding wound that needs immediate surgery. What happened to the promised renewable plans throughout the Family Islands? And Madam President, I completed my master's in energy law and policy. And I didn't want to bore you with all of the information of my studies, but I did write a dissertation that was titled Sustainable Development, Removing the Barriers to Renewable Energy. And I was pleased to hear the AG speak of his hopes of us engaging and empowering Bahamians to take on this approach to build renewable energy within their homes for themselves. However, within my research, it proved that many barriers exist in this country. One dealing with costs, the other with legislation, the other with installation, and trying to tie into the grid. So whilst we support renewable sector and every Bahamian having that opportunity to build solar plants and have solar power through their home, the government must remember it is their job to assist in removing the barriers. I remind you that many parts of this economy is on the decline. There are no new investment ideas under this government. Persons are losing their jobs, their homes, and struggling to make ends meet. And we have yet to see the real relief that was promised. With this exemption, this government is simply giving with one hand and taking away with the other due to the downward fiscal pressure on the government day-to-day operations. And Madam President, this is unsustainable for Bahamians. I wish to remind this F&M government that the PLP left in place an ambitious energy reform program, which started in August 2013. The program objectives were to ensure sustainable reductions in the cost of energy for all Bahamians, to realize a financially healthy electricity company, to provide reliable energy and increase energy security, improved and better customer service, and to ensure we are competitive and marketable as a country. This was real and true reform that all would have felt and appreciated. The PLP program was not this temporary solution to a boiled pot of problems. This F&M government, however, seems to be grasping at straws when it comes to producing the sort of energy reform program which they promised that they had the plans for. And even if they did not have a plan, Madam President, by now they should have at least figured out a reliable and sustainable option. It's been 18 months on the job. Probation is over. Show us the energy reform plans that you promised. Instead, however, they have stopped, reviewed, and canceled the reform process left by the PLP and ridden themselves at BPL of persons who had the institutional knowledge, not only of BC, but knowledge about the reform process. And now BPL seems to be in a state of utter chaos and one big ball of confusion with the recent accusations of political interference, allegations of wrongdoing, and possible corruption, leading to the board being disappointed and the appointment of a new board. Madam President, I was further advised that during the PLP time in office, there was a dramatic reduction in the surcharge. In fact, the fuel charge had fallen from 27.7 cents per kilowatt in October 2014 to 10.9 cents per kilowatt in December 2015, less than 40% the earlier rate. However, there is said to be an overall increase to electricity bills this day by 60% due to the cost of fuel. And I am constantly hearing stories of persons whose electricity bills have went from, say, $300 a month to $1,000. This is a strain on the average Bahamian. And whilst we welcome the temporary relief due to the VAT exemption, it must remain an urgent priority to continue pushing energy sector reforms forward, as the cost and reliability of supply of energy has proven to be a deterrent to investors who feel the cost coming to the Bahamas was prohibitive. Lastly, Madam President, while I fully support the increase of the VAT exemption ceiling on electricity bills from $200 to $300, I will once more remind this F&M government that time is of the essence. And there is a great expectation on your administration to make good on many of the promises made. Energy reform will be a game changer, as that's the most used utility for all Bahamians. If you bring relief on a larger scale, that will be remembered for days, months, and years to come. I remind you in this place and the other place that an energy reform program has already been produced by the PLP. Just use that as your blueprint and bring the relief the Bahamian people need and deserve. I support this amendment, but I make a clarion call for more to be done to lift the burden and to bring energy reform in the Bahamas. God bless the Bahamian people. God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
As many, Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Renard Henfield.
Good morning, Madam President, colleagues. Madam President, I rise to contribute to and support the government's VAT Amendment number 2 bill. And I support the bill to exempt our people from VAT if their bills are $300 or less. But I pause, Madam President, to acknowledge from the outset our Heavenly Father once again and to give thanks for His guidance and blessings. 2018, despite all that we've endured, has been a good year for the Bahamas. Madam President, not one hurricane has impacted us, and for that I am grateful. There is a misconception, Madam President, most likely due to political mischief or selective memories, that this government has done nothing to impact the lives of the masses. A misconception. Notwithstanding the fact, Madam President, that this government, within less than 2 years of being in office, has again, as I've said before and was reiterated on the last occasion, demonstrated its commitment to education and the education of our people. I hear so many people speak about the natural resources of the Bahamas. To me, the biggest and most valuable natural resource in this Bahamas is Bahamian people. And when a government can come in and realize the importance of educating its people, to now move to make BTVI and the University of Bahamas free for Bahamian students, I think they should be commended. And the government has demonstrated its commitment to educating our people, and not just the people of New Providence. You see, because for a long time, governments have been Nassau-centric. A lot of things have benefited those of us who live here in New Providence. But this government has gone even further with its commitment to introduce a living allowance of $500 for students coming from the Family Islands to BTVI and University of the Bahamas. So when I hear persons say the government has done nothing since coming to power to benefit the masses, I proudly say that I am the grandchild of Mama Ju from Inagua, the grandson of Wilbert Morse and Vivian Joaquin from Crooked Island and Acklands, Family Island people. So when a government comes in that is looking out for Family Island people, I appreciate that. I appreciate that, and I commend the government for doing so. Secondly, Madam President, again, another misconception, that the government has done nothing for Bahamians in trying to own a piece of the rock. And I remind our people, and I remind those critics, that since coming to power and in less than 2 years, this government has introduced the Affordable Homes Act, which is now providing service lots to Bahamians for under $30,000. Now, when you pick up the newspaper or you speak to any real estate agent, to buy a piece of property in this country today is a minimum of $65,000 to $70,000. But this government has saw it fit to bring forward legislation to pass the Affordable Homes Act that now allows Bahamians to purchase and build their homes as they wish, as they design them, on properties for less than $30,000, with utilities included. And I think the government should be commended for that. You know, Madam President, I recall making a contribution in this place entitled Give Credit Where Credit is Due. And at the time, the bill on the table was the credit reporting bill. And for quite some time, I've heard people for many years say that the banks aren't lending. The banks aren't lending, and they want to start a small business, or they want to purchase a home, or they want to send their kids off to college, but the banks aren't lending. And this government saw that issue, and in its attempt to address the issue and ensure that the banks can lend to our people, would have tabled and passed the credit reporting bill so that banks can give credit where credit is due. But I still caution our people, as I did then. There are many people in this country who can't get credit from the banks because there are some persons in this country who have gotten loans and credit cards from banks and haven't paid their bills. And persons deserving of credit haven't been getting credit. But this government kicks in and brings forth the credit reporting bill, now Act, to ensure that banks can give credit where credit is due. And that again is a reason to give this government credit. So when persons say the government has done nothing and brought no relief to the people, I look again to the bill that we're here debating today. A bill to amend the value-added tax laws of this country. Now, in November, as we all know, the people, myself included, I remember on November 30th, my wife went into BPL and paid the bill. Well, actually, she paid the bill online. And that bill was $400 and some, so I didn't get any VAT exemption on that. That was November 30th. I went in a week later, not realizing my wife had paid the bill the week before, and I paid a bill on November 7th. And I have both receipts. And I paid a bill November 7th, it would have been November 7th, because she paid October 30th, I'm sorry. And a week later, I paid a bill of almost $400. So I WhatsApped my wife, babe, make a note, I paid the bill. And my wife said to me, what are you doing? Why are you paying the BEC bill? I just paid the BEC bill a week ago. And she sent me her receipt. So in less than a week, my wife paid about $400 and I paid about $400. And at the same time, persons around the country were expressing that their utility bills had gone up. And the government kicks in response. That's responsiveness of a government, and moves or tables a bill to amend the law to remove VAT from bills. That's responsiveness. And you got to think about I pause to say that VAT increases our bill by 12%. So when a government kicks in and says, runs to Parliament and says, listen, we're going to remove VAT, not just from your bill up to $100, then $200, and now up to $300 in the space of 6 months now. That's responsive. That's a government that's trying to assist its people. I sat and listened, Madam President, and without interrupting, a wise man a few weeks ago who said to me, Mr. Henfield, it's better to be informed than opinionated. A lot of people jump up and they express their opinions and they have no facts. And I see Senator Morse came today with facts after facts after facts. So let's share some facts with the Bahamian people who are listening today, Madam President. A fact. The first fact I wish to share for our people today is that there was a fire at the Clifton Pier Power Plant. That's a fact. As a result, BC or BPL as we call them, had to focus its power generation on the Blue Hill Road plant. That's a fact. The Clifton plant uses bunker C, which is much cheaper than what is used at the Blue Hill Road power plant. That's a fact. Electricity bills will go up as a result. That's a fact. But the F&M government is changing the law as it relates to VAT to remove VAT on our bills up to $300. That's a fact. The PLP put VAT on us in the first place. That's a fact. 7.5. And the F&M government is now more than ever determined to get us on the solar path and other renewable energies. And that's a fact. Madam President, in my view, the government is doing a good job in the circumstances that it's being left in. Some of the critics are still hoping to return to power, and I know that's why they're posturing and and doing what they're doing. But that ship has sailed and that ship has sank. And that ship had 8 life vests. And the Bahamian people ain't thrown out no more. So, Madam President, I support the bill to exempt our people from VAT if their bills are $300 or less. And in closing, I would ask the government to consider over the next few months. In closing, I would ask the government to consider over the next few months a set reduced rate of VAT for specific BPL customers or an outright VAT exemption for specific BPL customers. And by that, I speak specifically to standalone and registered preschools and nurseries. What the government is doing today is great, and I commend the government. It's bringing relief to people. It's being responsive. But my recommendation, suggestion moving forward into next year, Madam President, would be that the government again consider either a reduced rate of VAT for preschools and nurseries, licensed community centers, and homes and small businesses consuming less than 750 kilowatts of electricity per month. It would ease the burden on our social and educational sector, and it would incentivize those homeowners and small businesses using less electricity. So, Madam President, I support the bill. May God bless the people of the Bahamas, and may God bless the government of the Bahamas.
As many.
Go after me.
Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Darville.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Madam President, and I am so pleased to stand today to make my brief contribution to this bill. And the good senator who spoke before me came with his facts. The senator before him, no, the senator before you came with his facts from an opinionated Tribune article. And I would like to say that the proposed $100 increase to the threshold to eliminate the 12% VAT, while BPL announced a 60 to 70% increase in the overall electricity bill, which accounts to more than $150. So 1 plus 0, 1 minus 1 equals 0. So the reality is, if you increase the threshold to $300 and eliminate the VAT on $300, and you increase the electricity bill by 60 to 70%, the $300 is now increased to $450, so the customers you're trying to help, you will never help them. So 1 minus 1 is 0. It is voodoo. Because you're not helping anybody. The same customers, you're trying to create the impression that by increasing the threshold to $300, you're going to help more people. The reality is that is not true. The most you would be able to help is the ones that you're helping at $200, because those ones, their bills will increase by $120, and you lose some of them as well. So even though it is always good to help the poor, we must be measured and mindful and scientific in the approach that we go about to help those we seek to help. This particular bill, even though it attempts to help poor people, really is not bringing anyone else to the table, because the increase by 60% far exceeds the give back by 12%. Madam President, I stand to my feet because I'm concerned about the impact the cost of electricity have on commerce in the Bahamas, as well as the impact it will have on the poor. I stand to my feet because the minister responsible for energy in the other place articulated the fact that some 5,000 plus people are presently off the grid. Many who are on the family islands. No, irrespective, there's 5,000 poor people who could benefit from this VAT reduction but will not have the opportunities because they simply cannot afford to get their supply back on. I believe a good, compassionate government have to find a way to sit with the representatives of BPL and the Department of Social Services and find a way to get these people back on the grid. Madam President, this morning I rise to make my contribution for a bill for an act to amend the Value-Added Tax Act.
Okay, senators,
Which seeks, thank you for
one person on at a time, please. Thank you.
because they all want to attack me. I could handle it. But
Senator,
thank you so much, Madam.
stick to your script.
Madam President, I would not be long today. I said it before because I believe our deputy leader, the Honorable Chester Cooper, in the other place, summed up this bill as a failed maneuver by the government to throw crumbs off the cabinet table to help the poor. It's mere crumbs. You could find money to do whatever you want, but you throw crumbs, and you know what's even amazing, Madam President? They throw the crumb off and won't take it back on July the 1st, 2019, if and only if the cost of fuel on the international market decrease. Madam President, the financial impact of high energy costs affects all sectors of the society. I could tell you, I'm a business person, and when the economy is slow and retail sales are not moving, as a business person, there's really only three things you can look at. One, the cost of rent. Two, your labor costs. And three, your electricity costs. And when your electricity costs balloons to 60% or 70%, you can't go to the landlord and ask him to reduce the rent because he can run you out the office. BEC coming to shut you down, BPL coming to shut your electricity off, so the only place you could turn to is labor. And what you intend to do as a business person to try to survive is to try to shrink whatever potential shrinkage you can do in order to survive. So the high cost of energy affects labor. And you're beginning to see some of the side effects of it, how important energy is, because we see the uproar of the labor movement now. This is all interconnected to additional costs that is affecting business. Madam President, the government, by the way of the chairman of BPL, made an announcement that electricity bills throughout the country, except Grand Bahama, Spanish Wells, and I believe Grand Key is still private. If I'm wrong, I believe BEC may have taken it back. Water Key is Grand Bahama Power Company. But I believe these two entities are not impacted because I know for sure Emerald from Grand Bahama is a private entity that operates in a completely different regulatory environment. The immediate pushback, and you know, I listened very carefully to my relative from Inagua, smooth operator, tried to wiggle his way through the situation to create the impression that the government is doing a great deal with this particular bill. I beg to disagree, because the realities and the mathematics simply do not add up. Madam President, I believe this bill is a direct result of the pushback by the Bahamian people. I realize I've been there before, and I sat around the table, and I know what pressure is coming from the general population. It forces politicians in a particular direction. It has forced politicians in a particular direction, which led to this bill being expedited through these two houses. Madam President, high cost of electricity affects businesses. It affects potential local and direct foreign investment, I know, Because when I sat in the chair where my opposite sat, we had many opportunities for direct foreign investment that went against the wayside simply because of the cost of electricity. It is imperative for any government, the one in now and the one that is about to come in 2022, to address the issue of the high cost of electricity. But one of the things that I'm very concerned about is the high cost of electricity and its impact to the healthcare delivery of the Public Hospitals Authority. You see, because I remember when we were government in the former administration, and then the then company, the Grand Bahama Power Company, that is fully operated by Emerald, decided to cut the electricity off on all public institutions on the island of Grand Bahama. And I remember distinctly going into the office and begging them to please do not turn off our essential services, which is schools and our hospitals. This was a great concern for the government then because, like this present government, we had a shortage of capital to meet our commitments. And we had to find the wiggling room necessary to prioritize what was important in the country. So I know what the cost of electricity can do to our public infrastructure as well as all our essential services. Madam President, on the other hand, the government increased the cost of electricity to consumers, business people in particular, in an economy that is struggling. The impact of that has a rippling effect all the way down to the Department of Social Services. I'm very concerned about it, and I don't intend to politicize this whole issue of the cost of energy. It is a serious problem that is plaguing the growth and development of our country, and I believe that we have to find a nonpartisan approach to address this issue and to move away from our high consumption of fossil fuels. Madam President, I'm an electrical engineer. So as I stand to my feet, I know about the cost of electricity. I know about what it takes to generate power with the failing infrastructure that presently exists in the country. I know exactly about the challenges at the Clifton Player plant. I know what the fires caused to those those generators. We understand that they burn a less expensive fuel than the Big Pond Power Station. We know that the Big Pond Power Station is not a good model for power generation in the country. But the question is, why is BPL still advancing the Big Pond Power Station and not seeking to implement, and this is where I really want to go before I take my seat, the programs that were left in place, evidence-based programs that this government spent 5 years to develop through a strong energy policy which required us to become users of renewable energies 30% by the year 2033. Madam President, let me say from the onset of the debate that we on this side, we support the threshold increase for potential relief for poor people. It will be unchristian for any member in this honorable place not to support any form of relief to anybody. I support it.
Thank you. Thank you.
But that is not my position here today. My position is that the government needs to do more. They need to do more. During the campaign leading up to the last general election, the Free National Movement said you had a plan for the implementation of renewable energy and to lead the way in the Caribbean for the future. But after 2 years of talk, Madam President, the issues at BPL, instead of getting better, they're escalating. And we believe that what we are currently experiencing at the corporation is a direct result of this administration's review, stop, and cancel policy. All in an attempt to, I believe, to sabotage the Progressive Liberal Party and to abort the plan left behind by our party that we believe had the potential for financial restoration at BPL. Madam President, the execution of long-term economic recovery and the increase of potential profits at BPL was essential for our administration. We understood what the legacy debt was doing to BPL and how it was crippling its recovery. And we knew our plans to improve the reliability of services, particularly to our inefficient, aging transmission and distribution systems on New Providence. The need to increase its generation capacity was a focus for our administration in order for us to be able to move to meet our commitments. We have places like The Point, who, in their heads of agreement, demand that the government meet a commitment for power generation, or they will generate their own power. The question I ask now is, be ready for The Point to be online? Do they have the generation capacity in the midsummer months in order to keep the generation online? Or would we see this particular investment take the bull by the horn and generate their own power? Because they will have to generate their power if BEC can't do it. Madam President, in our administration, the Ministry of Works and the Environment played a vital role in the establishment of the release of our country's new energy sector policy, which committed a minimum of 30% of our fixed energy matrix by way of renewable energy in 2033. I remember the Minister of Environment in his deliberation in Abu Dhabi leading a group in the Caribbean on ways of transforming the energy sector and creating opportunities for the Bahamas to capitalize on the carbon war room benefits that exist in these treaties that currently exist for our country. The purpose of energy self-generation program, which allowed both homes and businesses to use solar generation power and to connect to the grid under a net billing system, was before IRCA, just prior to us leaving office. The leader on the side officer, when you stand to your feet, you could tell us exactly where that's going. It was there. We left it in place with IRCA. Inquire about it. You didn't even look. You didn't even look. You didn't even look. Your Minister of Energy didn't even look to see exactly what is happening when we made IRCA the regulatory body, except for the island of Grand Bahama. I was there. I was there, sir. I played an active role in it, so I don't talk about what someone has told me. I'm there. I was there when we were making it happen. The great work that was done by our leader, the Honorable Philip Brave Davis, and the Honorable Ken Dossett, I think was paramount, that has brought us to a point whereby if these policies and programs that were articulated in many of the literature left behind by our administration was to put in place, we would see relief in the energy sector. I commend both of them for the hard work, because I know, and all the technical advisors, both in the country and abroad, who directed the government on the ways we should go with the establishment of our new energy sector policy. Madam President, there's no doubt in my mind that the blueprint left behind by the Progressive Liberal Party would have improved the reliability of transmission, distribution services at BPL, reduced financial losses. It will certainly have reduced the heat losses at both the Clifton plant as well as the Big Pond plant for generation services throughout the country. Find it, it's there. Madam President, all these losses at BPL are passed on to the customer. You know that the inefficiencies of power generation and the heat loss associated with turbines is all a part of the factor for the fuel surcharge that is passed to the customer. And there's a big debate around the world is whether or not the customer should be responsible for that fuel heat loss, or it should be the generating company. But nonetheless, these are all things that are coming and affecting the way we do business in our country because of the high cost of electricity. Madam President, the white elephant in the room, and Senator Henfield spoke specifically to it. The fuel costs associated with the operation of the Big Pond power station, that is simply not practical today. The cost of diesel, I just read an article the other day that people are now trying to look at kerosene rather than diesel. But yet, we're using this Big Pond station as our ace in the bag. And all of these costs are being forwarded to all of us as customers on the island of New Providence. Madam President, with the exception of Grand Bahama, Spanish Wells, and Grand Key, and a few private islands, the rest of the country power generation is supplied by BPL. It is a known fact that most of the small islands BPL operates on is at a loss to provide these essential services. This is a part of our development plan, and this is one of the challenges of managing an archipelago. You have to provide and you have to duplicate these services on each island, irrespective of the cost, because you need health care, you need power, you need water, you need education. And even on the island of Long Key, where I've descended from, where the population is somewhere between 5 and 8, these essential services are necessary in order for us to be able to ensure that all our people get the same advantages they are entitled to. Madam President, let's take our eyes off BPL for a moment, and let's look at Grand Bahama, and let's see what the private entity Emera is doing in the island of Grand Bahama, which is different than what BPL is doing. We all know that under the Hawksbill Creek Agreement, the legitimate regulator for power generation and utilities is the Grand Bahama Port Authority. That's just the way the legislation is passed. We passed a bill which tried to circumvent that and make IRCA the regulatory for the entire country, and immediately something was filed in the court to stop that.
Yeah, but they won't go over there.
No, but the thing about it, AG,
Trying to get them to go to court.
I wish you the best. Between me, I support you 100% on that, because the challenges affected me as the same way as affecting my counterpart who's sitting in front of me. The big question is, how does Emera make a profit in the midst of this environment and satisfy their shareholders, whereas BPL continue to take deep losses? This is something we need to look at, because when we sat in the chair, we looked at it. The current Grand Bahama expense, we have a fixed cost of electricity per kilowatt hour, irrespective of how the fuel fluctuates on the international market. This is all a direct result of agreement between Emera and the Grand Bahama Port Authority, who under law have the right to regulate the industry on Grand Bahama, which is inclusive of East and West Grand Bahama. Now, there's some issues with that as it relates to a loose agreement that could be clipped off. I wouldn't get into that detail, but the reality is it did exist. One just passed, and the government failed not to pull it back. And there's reasons why that is happening. But the point that I'm trying to make is that when Emera came to the government and the Grand Bahama Port Authority for an increase a few years ago, they came up with a plan that incorporated fuel hedging, LED street lights throughout the island, allow the industrial sector to do some self-generation, all in an attempt to be able to mitigate the costs and the potential increase of electricity per kilowatt hour. This rate that presently exists, that we all benefit in Grand Bahama, which I understand is lower than what you're experiencing in Nassau, will come back to the table in a matter of few years for renegotiations. If it is in our time, we will deal with it. 23? Okay, so it will be after the next general election. So whoever government is in power will have to deal with this issue and deal with it in the best interest of the Bahamian people. Madam President, Emera is making a profit, and his shareholders are satisfied with the profit. I read in one of the dailies the other day that they're happy. While here in New Providence and the rest of the Family Islands, except Spanish Wells, who I understand is generating a profit as well, we catching hell because of the present circumstances at BPL. They're complicated. I'm not trying to trivialize them or make them seem like it is the responsibility of the present government. They were there when we were there. And we need to find a way to address them. Now, I said earlier that the plan that we put in place, we thought would be successful in dealing with these issues. If the government intend not to use that plan, then you need to articulate your plan. We are waiting diligently to find out how you propose to address the issues affecting the power generation, the power transmission and distribution, and the cost of doing business that presently exists at BPL. Madam President, the Honorable Desmond Bannister is on record saying that thousands of residents throughout our country is without electricity and need help. I agree. Thousands were there when we were in power. We made an effort to bring relief and find ways, not through BPL. You see, the article you produced had to do with a plan with BPL. The government decided to use a social service initiatives. Social service initiative. No, we put in place a situation where individuals whose power is off can go to the Department of Social Services to try to get funding to turn their power back on.
To get funding.
Yes, many people benefited from it. Many people benefited. We in Grand Bahama spoke with the power company, the Grand Bahama Power Company, to assist the government in trying to get people back on the grid. And we had some success in that program. I encouraged the member opposite to look into that because at that particular time they were receptive to help. Maybe because they were seeking an increase in the kilowatt hour and they wanted to assist the government so that we can go on the same page. Madam President, I said it before. Unfortunately, this increase in threshold will help only the same people who are presently being helped. A 60% increase in the fuel bill of a client with $200 means that there's a $120 increase, which brings the amount from $200 to $320, so they wouldn't benefit. So it's simple mathematics. It sounds good. It seemed to be a good gesture, but when you really dig into it and turn over the pages, we need to articulate fully how many people will truly be helped with this increase. On the same wicket of a 60% increase in the fuel bills. Madam President, I believe the government should move immediately to implement many of the alternative energy plans left in place by the Christie administration or through the Ministry of Environment, articulate their plan on how they propose to reduce the cost of energy. Madam President, the Prime Minister promised the Bahamian people months ago that there will be a full investigation into the operation of the former board at BPL and the reasons surrounding the firing of them and the chairman and other board members. Like so many other investigations promised by this administration, one begs the question, where is the accountability, transparency promised by this administration during the campaign? Madam President, I will get another opportunity at the right time to speak a little bit more about certain things that I'm concerned about and the way it's affecting the Bahamian people, but I would save that for another opportunity. And before I take my seat, I would like to end where I started. The Free National Movement has once again misled the Bahamian people. They campaigned on the promise that they had a plan to lower the cost of energy throughout the country. 18 months later, in their term in office, the cost of electricity has increased by some 60 to 70%. Meanwhile, thousands of Bahamians remain off the grid. Yes, once again, the Bahamian people will take crumbs off the cabinet table, hoping that the expiration date for this increase in VAT will move further from July to 2019. But like the big elephant in the room, and Senator Henfield spoke about it, the power generation capacity of the country and the great need for us to implement the long talked about renewable energy strategies for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. The Bahamian people have long memories. I want everyone on the side opposite to listen to me carefully, because I know, I experienced the wrath of the Bahamian people. The Bahamian people have long memories, and this administration better brace itself in 2022 for the big payback. The reality is, people are hurting throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. The cost of electricity is escalating. The cost of doing business is increasing. And businesses throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas are experiencing a downward trend in sales simply because the economy is not growing at the pace necessary in order for the country to expand its ability to create additional employment. I strongly recommend to the government to move swiftly to articulate your energy plan, or go into the archives and find out what the Progressive Liberal Party has done. The plans that we put in place were not our plans. We were guided by technical experts in the country and around the world. And I strongly recommend stop trying to reinvent the wheel. Utilize what is in place. This is what continuous governance is all about. Things that are good, that can work, use them and take credit for the results, rather than putting it on the side in the bucket of stop, review, and cancel policies of the Progressive Liberal Party. Madam President, with those few words, I take my seat.
Make sure you turn your mic on. Quasi, turn your mic on. Turn your mic on.
Madam Vice President, thank you very much. And once again, it is a privilege to stand before the Bahamian people and to contribute to what is what has become a very lively debate, but what is really an important debate on the value-added tax amendment bill of 2018. And Madam Vice President, let me say at the outset that I completely support this bill as it will. And I agree with the first statements of Senator Jo Beth, who indicated that she supports this bill because it will bring some relief to the Bahamians. And I agree with her that it will bring relief to Bahamians. You know, Madam Vice President, before I get into the substantive, there was a lot that I agree with, particularly with respect to Grand Bahama Power Company, and I'm going to speak a little bit about the Grand Bahama Power Company. And there's a lot that I agree with Senator Darville with respect to what he said about what's happening and what happened and what is presently happening in Grand Bahama. But, Madam Vice President, for some reason, the Progressive Liberal Party consistently have a message in response to what this government is doing. We had plans. We had plans.
A couple months before election, you know.
We had plans. In fact, Senator Darville said, check the archives for the plans. We had plans. And you know, it's unfortunate that the message that they are presenting today, that you know, if you could have gone back into the past and if they could have said to themselves, you have plans. Maybe it would have been good if you actually executed the plans. Maybe if at the time they were in government, they visited these so-called archives. And if they saw the plans in the archives, then it would have been good if they had actually implemented the plans. But there is a consistent message. We had plans. But, you know, it is unfortunate that, and the Bahamian people are very, very smart, that the reality is you are not judged on how well you plan. Because the Bahamian people didn't elect you to plan.
Talkers they are.
They elected you to execute. And you know, Madam Vice President, I look back at, while I was in my seat, look back at some of the you know, it was actually a particular speech that was made by the former minister who was responsible for energy. And he spoke of some wonderful plans back in 2015. Some wonderful plans about how BPL was going to do the exact same thing that Senator Darville and Senator Jobert Colby spoke about back in 2015. But there is no sign whatsoever of any execution of those plans. And so Madam Vice President, the challenge that I have is, and one of the things that they spoke about was at the time of the implementation, and see, nobody is going to talk about this. The other side is going to gloss over this message. But there's something that the Bahamian people should remember, that the Progressive Liberal Party instituted value-added tax. But as a deliberate,
And they told you no.
as a deliberate action, and I want the Bahamian public to remember this, as a deliberate action, they had the opportunity to actually exempt electricity from VAT. They had the opportunity to do that. They had the chance to do that, but refused to do that. It is this Free National Movement who said, we are going to bring specific relief for electricity bills. We promised that we would bring specific relief for electricity bills. And so one of the first things that this government planned and executed was to exempt Bahamians from value-added tax on their electricity bills. That was done. And the Senator Jamal Morse also was very good in his articulation. But one of the things that he said, and also I believe it was said by Minister Bannister, was that approximately 52,000 people benefited from this exemption. 52,000 people benefited from this exemption. Now, all of the numbers that Senator Darville spoke about and said, well, you ain't gonna add to that. Well, bless the Lord that 52,000 people receive benefit from this exemption. 52,000. benefited from this exemption. So, Madam Vice President, I'm not surprised at the response, because if you gloss over all of the rhetoric, the response from the opposition is, we support what you're doing. It's going to bring relief, and we support what you've been doing. Now, their advice to us is to go to the archive and dust off the plans that they left
They put
there.
old and decrepit things in the archive.
But while we understand that they left the plans, this is a government that executes. Madam Vice President, Madam President, sorry. Madam President, I support the relief being provided by the government by increasing the exemption from VAT from $200 to $300. It is evidence that the government's it is evidence of the government's responsiveness to what is a very, very difficult situation for Bahamians across the country. On the island of Grand Bahama, we have a private company, the Grand Bahama Power Company, that provides our power, and we have had our share of challenges. Back in 2012, our fuel charge went as high as 20 cents. We pay half that today, at 10 cents. The Grand Bahama Power Company took the critical step, as was mentioned by Senator Darbo. The Grand Bahama Power Company took the critical step to hedge the fuel cost, which locked the fuel charge at 10 cents for the next few years. I believe it's up in 2023. However, what is actually good is that Grand Bahamians will still benefit from this initiative, as even more persons will access the VAT-free exemption. So in July, when the VAT-free exemption was first implemented, I was informed by the power company that an average of 74% of users or customers would benefit from the $200 threshold. So we said that on average, 74% of the customers would have benefited from that exemption. Madam President, I am now advised by the Grand Bahama Power Company that with this $300 VAT exemption threshold, that more than 90% of Grand Bahama Power Company's customers will be exempt from value-added tax on their electricity bill. So, in this bill, and with the action that this government is taking, for those of us who live in Grand Bahama, we are very pleased to say that it will, according to Grand Bahama Power Company, it will increase the amount of people who will benefit from the 74% who benefited when it was $200 to over 90 on average, and bear in mind that this is on average, that on average 90% of customers will be able to benefit from this exemption. The government of the Bahamas remains committed to growing the technology industry and the continual growth of the industrial sector, establishing Grand Bahama as a technology hub. As the government continues its work to further the development, we note the steps that were taken by the Grand Bahama Power Company. GBPC was among the first companies to sign up to participate in our second annual Grand Bahama Technology Summit, which was held in November the 14th to the 16th. The summit, which was hosted by our office, the Office of the Prime Minister in Grand Bahama, which was focused on continuing to build this vision of a technology hub and to diversify the economy of Grand Bahama, The power company and their international partner Tesla were among numerous local and major international corporations to participate in the Technology Summit. As an innovative sponsor for the event, the power company unveiled several of their initiatives which they have stated are geared towards not just technological advancement, but also geared towards business development. GBPC revealed that they are focused on several projects which they seek to bring renewable energy and energy storage into Grand Bahama and into Grand Bahama's grid. So GBPC has begun construction on a storage solution, which is the grid modernization, that will enable the introduction of solar and other renewables to Grand Bahama Power's energy mix. Grand Bahama Power Company has also begun work on the country's first utility-scale solar project, which they call the Sunrise Project, which will be completed during summer of 2019. Grand Bahama Power also advises that the solar Sunrise and Grid Modernization Project has generated over $2 million in the local economy in Grand Bahama. And they say that there is more to come. Perhaps one of the most informative plans was the expansion of their existing special energy rate for technology-based companies seeking to establish offices in Grand Bahama. The purpose of the new technology hub rate is to encourage and to stimulate new and expansion of industrial and commercial businesses in Grand Bahama, with a particular focus on high-tech sustainable business enterprises, thereby growing and diversifying the Grand Bahama economy. So they've informed us that there is this new, what they call a new technology hub development rate, which obviously is as a result of the government's vision to create a technology hub in Grand Bahama. And so they have created a discounted rate which will focus on attracting technology companies and providing some discount for technology companies. Obviously, the idea is the more technology companies that are able to come, the more jobs and employment they are able to provide for Bahamians. So this rate they've indicated is over a 5-year period of time and is on a scale from 25% discount to 5% discount. These development rates are also available to existing entities, and it was also available to existing entities. So we said it is expanding, they are expanding. We're not saying this is new. We're saying that they are expanding, and they are calling the expansion a technology rate. Now, I don't know if I could give the government credit for this, but this was an initiative that was done by the Grand Bahama Power Company. The power company also detailed plans for its Sunrise or its Solar Sunrise project as the company seeks to gradually move towards heightened reliance on renewable energy. So new high-tech entities which are approved by the Grand Bahama Power Company and or by the government with an established certain net load, that GBPC will work with the customer to provide what they call a behind-the-meter grid connected solar solution. So they will allow some of these new tech companies who want to come in, allow them to also have solar generation at the same time as being tied into the grid. Again, it is as an incentive to be able to attract new technology companies to come to Grand Bahama in accordance with the plan that the government has to develop a technology hub. Madam President, I'm also advised that the power company, that they intend to spend over $8.5 million to be invested in their energy storage facility that will attract the frequency and voltage, address the frequency and voltage fluctuations that often strike Grand Bahama's electricity grid. Anybody who lives in Grand Bahama knows, as a result of the huge usages and fluctuations caused by the industries, that they will begin to see, they may see during the day a fluctuation in their power. So as some of the big cranes and so on come on stream, then most people in Grand Bahama will see a dip in their power as a result of these companies, large industries coming on stream. But what is being done through the use and through connection with Tesla is a battery-operated system which will stabilize their grid. But not only will it stabilize their grid, it will allow them to bring on solar to be able to save, because one of the issues is our usage is higher in the night and in the evening than it is during the day. So the solution to that is to be able to keep the power on during the day with solar, but save it with the batteries so that you are able to utilize it at night. So that is the technology that the power company is utilizing now. So actually this month, in December, local contractors, FES Construction, began the civil work for the grid modernization project, and the foundations are already complete. So the GBPC team will be fully trained to assume operation and maintenance of the new battery energy storage system prior to its commissioning. The Solar Sunrise will be commissioned in 2019 and will further support GBPC's efforts to maintain downward pressure on the electricity rates. The whole point is, we want to encourage them to do this, because by encouraging them to utilize more solar, we will also encourage them to bring the present rates down, because to generate power by solar is cheaper than to generate solar by these other means. So, Madam President, GBPC also discussed and showcased their electric vehicles at the Technology Summit to exemplify additional ways that residents can utilize clean energy. So they have a fleet of electric vehicles, and we are also encouraging the public to also look at electric vehicles as a way to bring renewable and clean energies to the Bahamas. Madam President, the government of Bahamas will continue to encourage the Grand Bahama Power Company to move in this direction, and we will monitor the company's progress with a view to decreasing the cost of energy in Grand Bahama. That is the focus. So we will continue to monitor what they're doing so that we can ensure that they continue to move in a direction where we can decrease the cost of energy in Grand Bahama. We will also continue to collaborate with them, as with other local and international partners, as we work together to continue to diversify the economy of Grand Bahama. So, Madam President, we support this value-added tax amendment bill. This is more than a plan, but it is the execution of a plan. It will provide real help and real relief. And so, for those more than 90% of customers in Grand Bahama, they will, according to Grand Bahama Power Company, see relief from this bill. Thank you very much, Madam President.
As many, Chair recognizes
Thank you.
Senator the Honorable Carl Bethel.
Thank you, Madam President. No, thank you. Just a few quick points. First of all, I commend Senators again, on the quality of their presentations and the substance and careful thought of the issues reflected in each presentation. I must say, though, with regard to my distinguished cousin-in-law, who is acting leader on the other side, and for whom I have enormous respect. I know he's a big fella, my eyes short. I know I got to be careful what I say to you. You might reach over and tap me. But no, I think the point was adequately addressed by Senator Thompson. You know, in short, it's one thing to have a plan, it's entirely another thing to execute it. But it's yet another thing to have a plan and no one can find it. You know, the Progressive Liberal Party, and to be fair about it, right, historically, in terms of the reforms that took place in 2015 with the Electricity Act and the creation of what was hoped to be, no, it's the Electricity Act. It ain't called no renewable nothing, okay? And the reforms that took place in terms of the separation of the legacy debt in BEC that was kept in BEC, the creation of the SPV called BPL, which was a takeover, transmission, and current account activities, was that was a good plan. The problem is they passed a law that required BEC/BPL to come with a plan for upwards of 30% renewable energies, and then did nothing. They did nothing. They brought in Power Secure as the runner, a very successful company in the United States, and they were supposed to have a plan, and no plan materialized until the very bitter end in 2017, within days before their contract, in a sense, was ended. And I think one of the reasons why was that the plan that they produced really won. And the problem is, 2 years after they were given the contract by the PLP, they still had not come up with a comprehensive plan. Such elements of the plan, as we were seeing, were pointing to the decaying infrastructure at the Clifton Pier plant, the problems that they were facing in terms of generation, in terms of the efficiency, the lack of efficiency of the turbines. Or in other words, it wasn't a plan, it was a complaint. But the problem is that they weren't brought in to tell us the problems. They were brought in to solve the problems. And it was clear that they had no plan to solve the problems, and it was in the best interests of the Bahamian people that marriage was brought to a quick end, because they came in promising a plan, promising to revitalize the sector, and they failed utterly. It's not a question of, it's not a bad reflection on them. They are in their own comfort zone a successful company. But in a place as rugged as the Bahamas is not a place where we are not easy in the Bahamas, okay? We are not easy, all right? We is rough, and you don't come here just so, with your hands swinging, okay? If you say you got a plan, show me the plan. If you don't have no plan, if all you got is complaint, no problem. You saw the first iteration of our plan. You saw the first, and the Bahamian people saw the first iteration of our plan in the commitment of BPL/BEC towards moving, to the extent possible, from bunker C and diesel towards the more efficient, in terms of emissions, etc., use of liquefied natural gas, LNG facilities. And so we see that within the space of the next 3 to 4 years, there will be a regasification plant at Clifton Pier, and that the bulk of electrical generation will move to natural gas. That's the first iteration of the plan. We are also aware of the need for BPL-BEC for us to make them do what the PLP legislated but couldn't make them do, which is to move towards the statutorily mandated 30% generation by way of renewables. So you put it in place and did nothing about it. We now have the law, we have the mandate, and we will do something about it. That is the difference between the FNM and the PLP right there. The FNM, the PLP are good in talking, the talk, but it sound good. You feel good, but your current's still off when you go home. You know, and let me say one thing. I think this is an opportunity, just as a quick side note. It didn't arise here, except maybe as jokes at the last meeting, a joke across the table from the other side. They thought it was a joke. And I meant to answer them then, but I figured I'd do so here. And I just say this. Some people were picking sport at one of our members in the other place who spoke about cowboys. Well, I can tell you something right now. All of we grew up in this country. And all of we grew up knowing what it is when your parents couldn't keep that current on. So let's stop making a joke about what all of us have to go through. Okay, we're not going backwards. And the point I want to make, though, is we're not going backwards, but we don't have to keep doing the same things the same way and expect a different result. What do I mean by that? Why is it people see consumers need help? Bahamians need to be directed and given options. There are other options to having these heavy-duty water heating systems that heat water all day and all night. When you're not in the shower, you ain't bathing, you're out working, it's sucking electricity to keep a big tank full of water up to 85 degrees warm all day and all night. So it's a question of consumer education. There are things called tankless water heaters. You stick them on the wall, you don't have to worry about no tank bursting when it rusts out on the bottom and floods your utility room or your playroom where you have it. A tankless system. All you do is, it's a simple thing of electrical coils in a box. When the water runs through, it heats the water. So you burn a fraction of the electricity. So, you know, try and understand the essence of what the member is saying and distill the thought and pick sport. The reality is there are more efficient ways for people to get the benefits of going forward, warm water all the time at a fraction of the cost in terms of electricity. Simple things. And I'll tell you another big secret. A tankless water heater costs about half of what one of them big water heaters costs. And yet the savings that the consumer gets to their electricity bill simply by that small change would have an enormous impact on the electricity bills. The last point I wish to make is this. I hear that the members opposite complaining, saying, oh, this isn't going to help anybody, this is only a token thing. Well, in fact, the documentation supplied by BPL and referred to shows, you only talk about Grand Bahama, but in every single family island, 50% of the people, electrical consumers, on 50% will receive total exemption. Every single family island. I could just pick a few of them and you could see exactly what I mean. In Abaco, there are 3,200 and change whose bills are lower than $200. And 3,300 whose bills are over. And so roughly 50%. You go to my home island of Little Farmers Key, Exuma, where they got all of 32. Yes, the Nixons, yeah. We all descend out of the Nixons. We all, they say, you're probably my cousins. You're my cousins. But you look at the red Nixons. They come from a little further south. Anyway, all of 32 consumers of electricity accounts in Little Farmers Scheme. Exoma. Wait, I can tell you now. 18 are under 200 and 14 are over 200. More than 50%. But also, bear in mind, this calculation was on the old rate of 200. We've increased it. We've increased it to 300. So 60% of consumers will receive the benefit. They don't have Brylan here. They don't have Brylan. They don't have Brylan here. Eleuthera generally is 3,300 and change, under 200, and 3,400. So 100 difference over 200. And that 300 will make it 60% instead of 49. Okay? So the point is that contrary to what the members opposite have said, when they have claimed that this is only a token, that this is tokenism, it's not going to help people, that is absolutely untrue. This is a real help to real people throughout the length and breadth of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And the last point is, that the former government, when they were in office, had to acknowledge more than 10,000 people without electricity services throughout their tenure. And he said what they do, they could go to social services to try to get some help with that electricity bill. They put in place a mechanism for you to go to social service to try and get some help. Well, we're not in the business of putting in place something for you to try. We have put in something in place today that will actually help. More needs to be done to move to renewables. As I indicated in my contribution, more needs to be done to make electricity more affordable. The first big step in that direction is the move away from costly diesel and bunker C towards LNG, liquefied natural gas. That's a first step. It doesn't mean that we're going to totally do away with the need for some supplies of diesel or equivalents, particularly during peak hours, and also in terms of obtaining optimal quality electrical generation. So, for example, even though the bulk of the fuel is going to be liquefied natural gas, to achieve ultimate optimal kilowatt hour production in terms of power of the energy that is produced, you need to use special engines that will operate on a mix of LNG and other fuels. They're called reciprocating engines. All of this will come in the very near future, the end result of which we trust and believe will be significant lowerings of the base rates of electricity in the Bahamas. On that note, Madam President, I move that the bill be read a second time and committed.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Value-Added Tax Act be read a second time and committed. As many as are in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
Bill for an act to amend the Value-Added Tax Act.
Further second reading and committal of bills.
There are no further second readings. I don't think we're going to make copy of the bill.
Can you move so I can
Yeah.
take BP checks?
Thank you. Now you have to call for third readings.
No, we ain't finished this one yet.
No, second reading.
We have to go to the committee of the whole then.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just trying to find this.
Right.
It's hard when you get a one-page thing. Yes. Oh, I see, yeah. Yeah, the thought might be,
That's up to you.
yeah. I think we can not adjourn, we can suspend the sitting at second reading stage, and we know that we have to come back on Monday to do the second reading, and then we want to pass all of the bills on Monday. That's a very good, thank you, Senator Thompson. Let me, although I'm gonna move that we suspend until Monday at this stage. I just want to give notice in any event that next Monday, the 10th of December, we will be debating all the 5 financial bills that were tabled today as a compendium of bills. Thank you, with your consent. And so I will move the first bill, the substance bill, and we will debate them all, and then we will then go through all the stages and bring them all into force on Monday, God spare life. So on that note, Madam President, I beg leave to move that the business of the Senate be suspended until Monday, the 10th day of December, 2018 at 10 a.m. in the morning. If I may obtain a seconder.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of the Senate do now suspend until Monday, December 10th at 10 a.m. All those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The business of the Senate is now suspended to December 10th at 10 a.m.
Thank you.